Let's discuss with an expert on Russia, Dmitri Alperovitch. He's the author of the book World on the Brink and the chairman of the Silverado Policy Accelerator. Dmitri, thank you so much for being with us. Trump's national security advisor, Mike Waltz, spoke with his Russian counterpart today. How do you imagine the conversation over the ceasefire deal is going? What do you expect Russia to do?
Well, look, Putin is in a little bit of a pickle because I think that a lot has changed for him over the last month. He no longer feels like he can necessarily just reject this deal outright for fear of upsetting Trump. And also because he sees a much bigger prize beyond just Ukraine now. He sees an opportunity to normalize the U.S.-Russia relations, to potentially further drive a wedge between America and Europe, to drop sanctions and everything else. So he needs to play ball here. But what he may try to do is negotiate other components of the ceasefire. So, for example, the United States, of course, has re-enabled military aid to Ukraine yesterday. He may try to argue that what's the point of sending military aid if there's going to be ceasefire and do away with that, or find some other concessions that he can get. But I don't think he's going to be in a rush to accept this.
And when you say you don't think he's in a rush to accept it, do you mean that he makes sort of overtures? Like he's not going to say no, but he'll be looking for ways to exploit it and draw out this process?
That's right. That's his typical playbook. And by the way, he was just visiting the region of Kursk, which was, of course, occupied by Ukraine last year, where the Russians are launching counteroffensive. He ordered his military today to capture as much of that territory, actually all of it, as quickly as possible. I think he looks to consolidate those gains before he may have to accept the ceasefire. So he'll try to drag it out for as long as possible.
So the White House won't say if there are enforcement mechanisms that would prevent Russia from breaking this proposed ceasefire. During that big Oval Office blow-up, you had President Zelensky laying out the ceasefire that Russia had broken in the past. I wonder what kinds of security guarantees you would envision might actually keep the Kremlin in line.
Well, I don't think there will be any security guarantees of any consequences that will be provided. Certainly, American troops are off the table. I don't think even European troops are going to be willing to fight Russia without American backing. But look, Donald Trump can tell Putin that if he breaks his word on the ceasefire, he may double down on sanctions, on more economic measures. He may stop the ongoing talks right now on normalization of relations. So there can be real consequences for Putin, particularly if he sees a much bigger price at the end of the table with regards to a closer Russia-U.S. relationship.
Dmitri, we hear President Trump stating repeatedly now that Ukraine doesn't hold any cards. What cards do you see Ukraine holding right now, and how many fewer cards are they holding than they were even 3 or 4 weeks ago?
Well, the most important card that Ukraine is holding is its willingness to keep fighting this war even without U.S. support, which it can do if the Europeans step up and try to compensate for the loss in U.S. equipment and munitions, which will be difficult for them to do, but it is doable. So if Ukraine indicates that with America or without, it's going to keep fighting this war to try to get to a just peace that it can't get at a negotiation table, then it has, frankly, all the cards, and America will have little leverage over it.
So Secretary of State Marco Rubio touched down in Canada for a meeting with G7 ministers today. Is there anything specific to Ukraine that you'll be looking for as part of that conversation?
Probably not. Look, the United States has made it very clear, the White House has made it very clear that it wants to negotiate an end to this war between the three parties, Russia primarily and Ukraine secondarily, and that the Europeans, they don't see necessarily having much of a role to play here. Ukrainians have been trying to push the Europeans into that conversation because they know, of course, that the Europeans are more likely to insist on security guarantees than other conditions that are preferable for Kiev. But this will be very hard for them to pull off because Donald Trump wants to do bilateral deals. That's what he did in the first term, and that's what he's likely to do in the second.
Dmitri, thank you so much for being with us. Dmitri Alperovitch, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ahead, a brewing disagreement among House Republicans as Speaker Johnson tries to narrow the focus of one of President Trump's key priorities.
The Arena with Casey Hunt, today at 4 p.m. on CNN.